we've all grown up, differently to our other generations. And I very much feel if I can do it myself, I want to do it myself. And there are times when you can't do it yourself and the system takes over or it's appropriate to do things differently. But I think driving your son and your wife away from...
In a move that stunned the world, King Charles III, at 76, made a decision that shook the very foundation of the British monarchy. His wife Camilla and her children, once close to the throne, were suddenly cast aside. A leaked document revealed plans to elevate her daughter, Lopes, within the royal estates, a betrayal that could destroy everything. The monarchy, once united, now faces its most dangerous crisis yet.
You could certainly get help. There's nothing wrong in that. But the reason I'm smiling is that it always makes me laugh when you read in the newspapers or you hear on them that, of course, there will have been, people would have been prepared for this.
And the future of the royal family hangs in the balance. What happened behind palace walls could change the royal family forever. Sources inside Buckingham Palace suggest that the rift within the royal family began to deepen when Prince William, along with his sister Princess Anne, formally presented their request to King Charles. The request was a bold one, to cut all ties to Camilla's family and remove any financial support they had previously been given. This move, which insiders describe as part of Prince William's plan to modernize the monarchy, had been a long time coming. For years, there had been growing tensions between the traditional royal family members, particularly Prince William, and Camilla's children, who had been increasingly seen as integrated into royal life. According to the sources, the final request to sever ties was made after several discussions within the royal family about the direction the monarchy should take. It seems that the new generation, represented by Prince William, was determined to restore some semblance of traditional monarchy, where power, influence, and inheritance were determined by bloodline and service, not by affiliation or proximity to the throne. While King Charles had worked to integrate Camilla and her family into the royal fold, Prince William saw this as a step too far. He felt that Camilla's children, who had no formal titles or direct royal lineage, were gaining too much visibility and influence within royal circles. The request to sever financial support and cut ties with Camilla's family was seen as a drastic measure, especially considering the royal family's history of maintaining a united front. However, it quickly became clear that this was more than just a family dispute. It was a statement about the future of the monarchy itself. The decision was a calculated one, with the aim of restoring the monarchy's credibility in the eyes of the public. For Prince William, it was essential that the monarchy return to its roots, a monarchy where the role and influence were not decided by marriage or proximity, but by direct bloodline. Buckingham Palace responded with a statement that was both brief and well-crafted. The palace, on a cool Tuesday morning, issued a short but powerful release that spoke of a necessary restructuring of royal trusts. The release was carefully worded to suggest that the changes were purely administrative and intended to ensure long-term institutional integrity and stability. At first glance, it appeared to be just another routine announcement from the palace. However, what was missing in the statement spoke volumes. The statement made no mention of Queen Camilla's family. No names, no references to her children, and no subtle language to imply their royal status. This omission did not go unnoticed. Royal watchers, media insiders, and the public quickly picked up on the lack of any reference to Camilla's family. The decision was seen as a significant break from the tradition of keeping royal family matters under wraps. For many, the absence of mention was more than just a formal decision. It was a clear indication of the deepening divide within the royal family. As the news spread, it dominated headlines in London, Sydney, and around the world. The removal of Camilla's family from royal trusts sparked immediate debate. Was this a precursor to a broader royal reform? Some saw it as an act of revenge, a long-delayed expression of the royal rift that had been simmering beneath the surface for years. Others speculated that this was a necessary step to ensure the monarchy's survival, with public approval for Camilla's family's royal ties already on the decline. Public opinion surrounding Camilla's family had been shifting for some time. Critics of the monarchy had long claimed that Camilla's children were enjoying the privileges of the royal family without earning them through birth or service. There was a growing sense of unease, particularly among the British public, who felt that the monarchy was becoming too disconnected from its traditional roots. The royal family had, over time, become a symbol of both tradition and modernity, but some felt that the influx of non-royals into the fold was blurring the lines between the two. As a result, the decision to remove Camilla's family from royal trusts came at a time of heightened scrutiny for the monarchy. With public approval ratings for the institution at a low, the royal family was facing increasing pressure to adapt and modernize without losing its historical identity. The announcement was, in part, an attempt to restore some of the monarchy's credibility in the eyes of the public, and it immediately sparked widespread discussion. In the aftermath of the statement, the media and social media outlets were flooded with reactions. On one hand, there was praise for King Charles's decision, with many viewing it as a necessary step in preserving the integrity of the monarchy. On the other hand, there were those who saw it as an unnecessary and divisive move, one that could further alienate the monarchy from the people it served. As the debate raged on, the royal family found itself at a crossroads, with its future hanging in the balance. The decision to remove Camilla's family from the royal fold was not merely a matter of family dynamics. It was a pivotal moment in the history of the British monarchy, one that forced King Charles to confront difficult choices about his legacy, the future of the monarchy, and the direction it should take. It was clear that the royal family was undergoing a transformation, one that would redefine its role in modern Britain and the world. For many, the statement from Buckingham Palace marked the beginning of a new era for the monarchy. Whether this change would be enough to restore public faith in the institution remained to be seen. But one thing was certain: the royal family, for better or for worse, had made a bold move. The consequences of that move would ripple through the monarchy for years to come. The drama within the walls of Buckingham Palace was far from over, and it seemed that this was only the beginning of a long and complicated journey for the royal family. The ongoing tension between Prince William and Camilla's family continued to escalate, revealing a deeper division within the royal family. For years, there had been a subtle undercurrent of discomfort, particularly surrounding the growing visibility of Camilla's children, Laura Lopes and Tom Parker Bowles. These two individuals, who had no direct royal lineage or titles, had begun to gain increasing access to royal functions and activities, raising eyebrows within the royal household. Initially, their attendance at royal gatherings had been seen as a gesture of inclusion. Laura Lopes, a respected art curator, and Tom Parker Bowles, a culinary critic and journalist, had been invited to various events, mostly in a relatively low-profile manner. Laura, who had kept a somewhat understated presence at high-profile gatherings, was frequently seen in the background, never in the limelight, but always present at important royal events. Tom, on the other hand, was less visible at ceremonial occasions, but he enjoyed considerable access to royal circles, particularly in areas related to royal activities that involved food and hospitality. To the outside world, this presence appeared to be a natural extension of Camilla's family being integrated into royal life. But to those within the palace, it was becoming clear that there was a deliberate effort to establish a sense of belonging. It was no longer just about ceremonial roles or invitations. It was about creating a sense of permanence within the royal sphere. The subtle presence of Camilla's children was beginning to take on the form of something more intentional. Many royal insiders began to question whether this was an attempt to secure their place within the royal family for the future, even if it was not formalized through titles or duties. Prince William, the Prince of Wales, appeared to be the most vocal about his concerns, though much of his unease was kept behind closed doors. As the future king, he had always been concerned with the integrity of the monarchy and its traditions. He had been raised to believe that the monarchy's strength lay in its history, its connection to lineage, and the sacrifices made by previous generations. The monarchy was an institution built on duty, service, and bloodline. The idea that someone without a direct connection to the royal family could gain influence and prominence by proximity was deeply troubling for William. In particular, William began to feel that the growing involvement of Camilla's children in royal affairs threatened to undermine the monarchy's legitimacy. He saw their increasing visibility not as a natural extension of royal life, but as an invasion. While Camilla's children had never sought titles or public acknowledgement, their growing influence within royal functions was hard to ignore. For William, the monarchy was not just a family affair. It was a national institution that demanded respect for its traditions and values. He began to believe that Camilla's family was benefiting from the royal spotlight without having earned it, and this was something he could not accept. The tension between William and Camilla's family was not merely a personal issue. It had become a question of royal policy. Prince William's discomfort was not solely with the presence of Laura and Tom at events, but with the very notion that they were being integrated into the royal fold without any formal recognition of their place within the institution. While Camilla's role as queen consort was officially recognized, her children's presence at royal functions raised difficult questions. Why were they attending events that were traditionally reserved for direct heirs or senior working royals? Was this an attempt to alter the fabric of the monarchy? These questions began to weigh heavily on William, and it became clear that the issue was not going to go away. His concerns were shared by Princess Anne, his aunt, who had long been a stabilizing force within the royal family. Anne, who had always stayed out of the media spotlight and had performed her royal duties without fanfare, began to see the situation for what it was: a quiet but persistent attempt to change the structure of the monarchy. Anne, like William, believed that the monarchy's strength lay in its traditions and its connection to royal bloodlines. The increasing involvement of non-royals, however courteous and respectful they might be, was something that could not be ignored. Princess Anne had always been a protector of the monarchy's integrity, and she was deeply concerned by the erosion of the traditional lines that had kept the royal family intact for centuries. She saw the growing presence of Camilla's family as a direct challenge to these traditions. As a result, she began to distance herself from events that involved Camilla's children. She declined invitations to attend their celebrations. When asked about her absence, politely explained that scheduling conflicts had prevented her from attending. However, those who knew Anne well understood that her absence was not accidental. It was a deliberate act of defiance. Anne's decision to distance herself from Camilla's family was a significant turning point in the royal family's dynamic. Her role within the royal family had always been one of stability and consistency, and her actions were seen as a strong statement. Anne did not view herself as a passive observer in this matter. She was actively making a stand. She had always been loyal to the monarchy and its traditions, and she was not willing to let those traditions be eroded by the growing influence of Camilla's children. It was not long before Anne and William began to discuss the situation in private. According to sources, their conversations were tense and filled with frustration. William had long felt that the monarchy was heading in a direction he could not support, and Anne's decision to align herself with him only strengthened his resolve. They both saw the same problem, and they both knew that something had to be done. The question, however, was what action to take. For William, the situation was clear. He believed that the monarchy could not survive if it lost touch with its roots. The royal family was not just a group of individuals. It was an institution that needed to be protected. And that protection, he believed, could only come through maintaining the strict boundaries between those who were born into royalty and those who were not. Camilla's family, however well-meaning, had crossed that line, and William felt it was time to put an end to it. Behind the scenes, Anne's intervention proved to be the catalyst for the dramatic shift that would soon follow. When Anne spoke out against the growing influence of Camilla's family, it sent a clear message to King Charles. Anne had always been seen as a neutral figure, a royal who had never been involved in the public battles of her siblings. But now, her actions spoke louder than words. She had made her position clear. Camilla's family did not belong in the heart of the monarchy, Anne's decision to confront King Charles was not an easy one. As the king's sister, she had always been a loyal supporter of his reign. However, when it came to protecting the monarchy, she was unwilling to remain silent. Her intervention was not an attack on Charles or his marriage, but a defense of the monarchy itself. She saw the monarchy as an institution that had been built on centuries of tradition and sacrifice, and she was not willing to let it be undermined by the quiet infiltration of outsiders. When Anne confronted her brother in private, the conversation was reportedly tense. She told King Charles that she could not, in good conscience, allow the monarchy to be reshaped by those who had not earned their place within it. She argued that the monarchy had always been about more than just personal relationships. It was about bloodline and service, and she made it clear that she would not stand by and watch as Camilla's family, however well-meaning, undermined the very foundations of the monarchy. King Charles listened in silence, but the weight of his sister's words was not lost on him. The conflict between loyalty to his wife and the preservation of the monarchy was tearing at him. For the first time in his reign, Charles was forced to confront a reality that he had been avoiding. The monarchy could not survive if it continued to blur the lines between royal and non-royal. Something had to change. The royal rift continued to deepen, and as the pressure mounted, the members of the royal family were forced to confront the growing tension between the old guard and the new. For Prince William and Princess Anne, their concerns about Camilla's family had reached a critical point, and they knew that something had to be done before the monarchy, as they knew it, was altered beyond recognition. It was no longer just a matter of family dynamics or personal grievances. The very fabric of the monarchy was at stake. The monarchy, built on centuries of tradition, was now facing a significant challenge that threatened to tear it apart. Princess Anne, who had long been regarded as one of the most pragmatic members of the royal family, had kept her concerns about Camilla's family largely to herself. For years, she had watched as Camilla's children, Laura Lopes and Tom Parker Bowles, increasingly became fixtures at royal events and gatherings. While their presence had initially been seen as a natural extension of their mother's role as queen consort, Anne had begun to notice a shift. The lines between royal and non-royal were becoming increasingly blurred. What had once been seen as a gracious gesture of inclusion now seemed like a calculated effort to secure a permanent place within the royal fold. For Anne, the problem was not with Camilla herself. Anne had always been loyal to her brother, King Charles, and she understood the complexities of royal life. However, the rapid rise of Camilla's family within the royal sphere troubled her. The monarchy had always been an institution rooted in history, duty, and bloodline, and Anne could not stand idly by as that history seemed to be slowly eroded. She had always respected the monarchy's traditions, and she saw the growing influence of Camilla's children as a direct challenge to those traditions. As Anne grew increasingly concerned, she began to take more deliberate actions to distance herself from events involving Camilla's family. She declined invitations to their gatherings, citing scheduling conflicts. But those close to Anne understood that this was no mere coincidence. Anne was making a statement, albeit a quiet one. She was signaling her disapproval of the way the monarchy was being restructured and the increasing influence of non-royals in royal affairs. Her decision to remove herself from the situation was a quiet but powerful act of defiance. It was clear that Anne, like William, believed that the monarchy needed to return to its roots if it was to survive. Meanwhile, Prince William was becoming increasingly frustrated with the direction the monarchy was heading. As the heir to the throne, he had always understood the weight of his responsibilities, and he had been raised to believe that the monarchy's role was to serve the people, not to indulge personal relationships or family dynamics. He had seen firsthand the sacrifices that his mother, Princess Diana, had made for the monarchy, and he believed that those sacrifices were what had given the monarchy its strength. Now, however, he was witnessing what he saw as an encroachment on the monarchy by people who had not earned their place. For William, the issue was about more than just Camilla's family being allowed to attend royal functions. It was about the very nature of the monarchy itself. The royal family had always been defined by its bloodline, by those who had been born into it and had dedicated their lives to it. The idea that non-royals could gain influence and prominence through marriage or proximity was a step too far for William. He was determined to protect the monarchy's integrity and ensure that it remained true to its roots. As William struggled with these concerns, he turned to his father, King Charles, in an attempt to address the situation head-on. The two men had always had a complicated relationship, shaped by the public fallout from Charles's marriage to Diana and the subsequent scandal that rocked the monarchy. However, they had also worked together to restore the monarchy's image after the tumultuous years of the 1990s. Now, with the monarchy facing a new crisis, William felt it was time to have a frank discussion with his father. According to sources close to the royal family, William's conversation with Charles was not an easy one. The father and son were said to have been deeply divided on the issue, with William taking a firm stance in favor of preserving the monarchy's traditional values, and Charles torn between his love for his wife and his commitment to the institution of the monarchy. The discussion was reportedly tense, with William expressing his deep concerns about the growing influence of Camilla's family and their increasing prominence within the royal family. William's frustration was clear. He felt that the monarchy could not survive if it continued to move away from its core values. He believed that the royal family was losing its sense of purpose, and he feared that the inclusion of non-royals like Laura Lopes and Tom Parker Bowles would irreparably damage the monarchy's credibility. While Charles listened to his son's concerns, it was evident that he was caught in a difficult position. He had always been devoted to Camilla, and he understood the importance of maintaining a united front. But he also knew that the monarchy was facing a moment of profound change, and that change had the potential to either strengthen or weaken the institution. As the debate continued, the pressure on Charles grew. He knew that he had to make a decision, but he also understood that any action he took could have far-reaching consequences. For Charles, this was not just a family dispute. It was a matter of the monarchy's survival. He had long believed that the monarchy needed to evolve in order to remain relevant in the modern world, but he also knew that such change had to be carefully managed. If he allowed Camilla's family to continue to gain influence within the royal family, he risked alienating those who still believed in the monarchy's traditional values. Princess Anne's involvement in the situation was a critical turning point. Her refusal to back down and her decision to openly express her concerns to Charles sent a clear message to the king. Anne had long been a steady and loyal figure within the royal family, and her words carried significant weight. She was not only the king's sister, but also a respected member of the royal household who had devoted her life to royal duties. For her to take such a firm stance against Camilla's family was a clear indication that the situation had become untenable. In a private meeting with Charles, Anne allegedly made it clear that she would not support the growing influence of Camilla's children within the royal family. She argued that the monarchy could not afford to lose sight of its core values, and she warned that allowing non-royals to gain influence would undermine the very institution that had been built over centuries. Her words were blunt and direct, and they had a profound impact on Charles. For the first time, the king was forced to confront the reality that the monarchy could not continue down the path it was on. Anne's intervention was a pivotal moment in the royal family's history. It was a moment that forced King Charles to reconsider his position and take action. The pressure was mounting, and it was clear that something had to change. The monarchy could no longer afford to ignore the growing rift between the old guard and the new. Charles had to decide whether to prioritize his love for Camilla and her family, or to preserve the monarchy's traditions and values. The decision he made would shape the future of the British royal family for generations to come. The decision that had been building for months finally came to a head when a crucial document was leaked. It was a document that would forever alter the course of the monarchy. What had been whispered rumors for years was suddenly confirmed. The contents of the document were a revelation. It detailed plans to elevate Laura Lopes, Camilla's daughter, to a prominent role in managing the royal estates. Specifically, the document named her as a future trustee of the crown's royal assets. This was not merely a suggestion or a recommendation. It was an official proposal, one that would grant her influence over some of the most significant financial and ceremonial aspects of the royal family's legacy. The leak of this document sent shockwaves through the royal household and beyond. It confirmed the suspicions of many within the royal family, who had feared that Camilla's influence was steadily growing, not just as the queen consort, but also as a powerful figure in her own right. For Prince William and Princess Anne, the revelation was the final straw. They saw this move as a direct assault on the monarchy's integrity, a step too far in a long-standing effort to integrate non-royals into the royal fold. What followed was a series of rapid, dramatic actions that would reshape the monarchy forever. As soon as the document was leaked, William and Anne moved quickly. They took the papers directly to King Charles, confronting him with the undeniable truth of what had been happening behind closed doors. The timing was critical. The leak had caused an uproar in the media, with commentators and royal watchers poring over the details of the document. Some saw it as a natural progression in the monarchy's evolution, while others viewed it as an unacceptable breach of tradition. Regardless of where one stood, it was clear that the monarchy was facing a crisis of legitimacy. King Charles, who had long been torn between his love for Camilla and his sense of duty to the crown, was now forced to make an impossible choice. The pressure was immense. On one hand, he had his wife, whom he had fought to marry after years of public scandal and personal sacrifice. On the other hand, he had his son, the future king, who was deeply concerned about the monarchy's survival and its integrity. William, backed by Anne's resolute stance, was insisting that the monarchy could not move forward in this direction. They argued that the monarchy's strength lay in its traditions, in its bloodline, and in the sacrifices made by those who had borne the crown before. As the gravity of the situation sank in, King Charles found himself caught between two competing forces, his family and the monarchy. It was no longer a question of personal loyalty or familial bonds. It was a matter of what the monarchy represented. Charles understood that the public would not accept a monarchy that blurred the lines between royalty and those who were not born into it. He also knew that any decision he made would have far-reaching consequences, not just for his family, but for the future of the institution itself. In the face of mounting pressure, Charles took the only course of action he felt was possible. He issued a decree that would forever change the structure of the royal family. The document was clear and unequivocal. Camilla's family, including her children, would no longer have any formal role in the royal trusts or in the management of royal estates. From that moment on, the only individuals who would control royal assets, finances, and trusts would be direct descendants of the House of Windsor. This was not a temporary measure or a symbolic gesture. It was a permanent change that would be enshrined in the royal family's policies going forward. The announcement was made with a cold, clinical statement from Buckingham Palace, one that was designed to appear routine, but was in fact a seismic shift in the royal family's operations. The statement explained that the restructuring of royal trusts was necessary for the long-term stability and integrity of the monarchy. It was a carefully worded statement that tried to downplay the drama and present the decision as part of a broader effort to modernize the institution. However, to those who had been following the royal family's internal struggles, the implications of the decision were clear. The monarchy had made a decisive break from the past, and this break would not be easy to undo. The public reaction to the decree was mixed. Some hailed it as a necessary step to preserve the monarchy's credibility, particularly among those who had long been critical of the growing influence of non-royals. The media, especially in Britain, celebrated the move as a bold step toward restoring the monarchy's traditional values. William, who had long advocated for such a change, was seen as a hero by many royal supporters. He had managed to push through a decision that not only aligned with his own views, but also with the public's growing desire for a return to royal traditions. On the other hand, the backlash from Camilla's supporters was swift and fierce. The queen consort, who had worked tirelessly to integrate her family into royal life, was left devastated by the decision. According to sources within the palace, Camilla was heartbroken by her husband's actions. In a private moment with Charles, she allegedly expressed her deep sorrow, stating that the decision would tear their family apart. It was a heartbreaking realization for Camilla, who had spent so many years fighting for acceptance and recognition within the royal family. Now, it seemed that all of her efforts had been in vain. The emotional toll of the decision was not lost on Charles either. As the monarch, he had always known that difficult choices would be part of his reign. But this decision, perhaps more than any other, felt personal. Charles had lived through public scandals, personal tragedies, and countless challenges. But this was different. This was not just about the monarchy. It was about his family, the people he loved. And in choosing the monarchy over his wife's family, he knew that he had made a decision that would forever change the course of his life and the life of the royal family. The decree was just the beginning of a broader shift in the monarchy's structure. With Camilla's family now officially removed from the royal fold, the focus turned to the future. Prince William, as the next in line to the throne, was poised to take on a more prominent role in shaping the monarchy's future. Public opinion, which had long been divided over the royal family, began to shift in his favor. People admired his courage and his determination to restore the monarchy's traditional values. William's popularity soared, and his public appearances became more frequent. He was seen as the future of the monarchy, a leader who could bring the institution back to its roots while still adapting it to the needs of the modern world. But for Camilla, the change was more than just a professional setback. It was a deeply personal blow. Once a powerful figure within the royal family, she was now relegated to the background. Her children, once seen as potential future players in the royal court, were now outside the fold. Camilla's silence in the face of this loss spoke volumes. She no longer attended royal events with the same enthusiasm, and her once vibrant presence seemed to fade into the background. The queen consort had become a figurehead, a ceremonial role that was no longer central to the workings of the monarchy. In the days following the decree, Camilla's children, Laura and Tom, withdrew from public life. While they did not publicly criticize the monarchy, their actions spoke volumes. Laura, who had once been a fixture at royal events, stopped attending them altogether. Tom, who had enjoyed intimate access to the royal family, also distanced himself from the limelight. The family, once seen as an integral part of the royal household, was now conspicuously absent from the royal scene. For the monarchy, the decision to remove Camilla's family marked the beginning of a new era. The public approval of the monarchy began to rise, and the royal family seemed to regain some of its former glory. The monarchy, which had been teetering on the edge of irrelevance, was now stronger than it had been in years. The royal family had been restored to its traditional roots, and with William at the helm, the future looked bright. But the cost of this restoration had been high, and for Camilla and her family, it was a bitter price to pay. As the months passed, the royal family continued to adjust to the new reality. William took on a more prominent role, with his public appearances growing in frequency and importance. He was no longer just the heir to the throne, he was the future of the monarchy. For the first time in years, the monarchy seemed united, with William and Charles working together to shape the future of the institution. Meanwhile, Camilla and her children were left to pick up the pieces of a broken legacy. The final act of this royal drama had been written. Camilla's family had been removed from the royal trusts, and with it, their future within the monarchy had been sealed. The monarchy had been restored to its traditional roots, and the monarchy's destiny was now in the hands of those who were born into it. It was a new chapter for the royal family, but one that had come at a great cost.